Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how to add a high score leaderboard to your game. So this will work in any game. I just happen to have this game that I wrote for one of my other courses and I wanted to add a leaderboard to it, so I thought it'd be quite cool. As you can see, when you start the game, if I just do a refresh, it shows the current leaderboard, and then if we click into the game and click to start, and let's kill a few zombies. But let's also let ourselves die. So we're getting attacked here, and then when we die we can enter a name. So I'm going to say, I'm going to give my name, so Morgan, submit. And as you can see, we are now on our leaderboard. I'll just refresh to get rid of the sound. So this leaderboard is held on a server, and I'm using Heroku to hold this data on a Postgres database. And Heroku has quite a cool little free tier, so you can quite happily hold something like this on there for free. It seems to work quite nicely. The only thing you'll find is that the server goes to sleep after a while, so it might take a few seconds for your leaderboard to pop up, but you can always pay them, I think it's like $5 a month if you want it to never go to sleep. So that's it. So this is kind of the Pern stack. You probably heard of the Pern stack, which is Postgres, Express, React, Node. Well, I'm not using React for this front end here. I'm just using JavaScript and a bit of Canvas stuff. So I guess it's not strictly Pern stack, but I guess the back end is Postgres, Express, and Node. So we've got some prerequisites here. You're going to need an IDE or an editor. So Visual Studio Code, it's a good choice. Everyone seems to be using it nowadays. Download Visual Studio Code at code.visualstudio.com. You can download it for your particular OS. Then you will definitely need Node and LTS 14 and above. That's absolutely fine, so download that, install that. We're going to be testing locally, so you want to install Postgres so you can have a Postgres database locally. So go to postgresql.org/download, download, install. And then to test our API, because we're going to be making a RESTful API, you're going to need something to test post requests, and funnily enough, Postman is a good way of doing that. So sign up, download Postman. And actually, another one that I almost forgot, you actually also do need Git, because Heroku will want to use Git to deploy. So you definitely need to install Git. So come to git-scm.com. There's a download there for Windows. You can also install it for Mac. Okay, let's get started. So if you open Visual Studio Code and go to File and Open Folder, and let's create a new folder, and I am going to call this Leaderboard. Click Select Folder. And let's open up our terminal. So terminal, new terminal, and let's do an npm init-y. That will create us a package.json file that will help us run some scripts. So let's change this to start node index.js, and we'll have a dev script that will use nodemon. to run our index.js. And if you don't know what NodeMon does, it essentially looks for changes and automatically restarts the server, so it makes development a lot faster. Let's save that. And we're kind of doing the back end of a Pern stack, really. So what do we want? Well, we can do an npm install, and it's Pern, so we want Postgres. The E is for Express. We're not actually using React. This is the back end, React's front end, and we've already got Node installed, so that should do the trick. So as you can see, that's added our dependencies of Express and Postgres to our package.json. And of course we are using NodeMon, so we can do an npm install -D and NodeMon. And as you can see, we've got our dev dependency there of NodeMon. So we're going to go with the flow and have index.js as our main file. So if we just do new file index.js, and we want to import Express, comma, and JSON from Express. And as you can see, I want to use ES modules because I want to be cutting edge and cool. And we have to go back into package.json and just tell Node that we want to do that. So we can do type and module, like so, with a comma on the end, so that it is happy. So we've imported Express. We also want to import cause, otherwise Express won't be able to do an awful lot for us, because we definitely want to call our server from another machine, so we need cause for that. And then we want to import pull from db.js, which we haven't got yet. So let's just comment that out for the moment. That's just to remind me that we're going to need to access our database at some point. But let's just carry on with the Express side of things. So we want to create an Express app. So we do const app equals Express, and we want to define our port, and this is going to depend on where we're running this. So if we are running this on Heroku, on a Heroku server, then that handily gives us the port via an environmental variable. And if that's not set, because we're not on a Heroku server, then we want to fall back on a port of 5000. On Heroku, our port will be whatever Heroku tells us our port is, and if we're on our local dev server, it will be 5000. Let's set up our cause options. So let's make this a const, and we can do cause options equal to, and if we want everyone in the world to access our API from anywhere, then we just do that and we can go home. If we want to be a little bit particular and picky, then we could actually specify an URL that we're going to be happy with, like so. So we may or may not use that. We'll see how we go. Now, let's use cause and send it in that options, like so. If you don't care about those options, you could just do that, and then again, and that basically allows anything to call our API. So that's definitely an option if you're not that bothered, but I'm going to put through that cause options just so I've got the option. Right, and then we want to pass in this JSON middleware, which essentially means it's a replacement for body parser. You might have come across body parser in the past. Essentially means that we can use JSON. So that does that. Right, let's set ourselves up an endpoint here. So what did I call this? I called it leaderboard. So let's call this leaderboards. And we're going to do a arrow function here. And handle both the request and response. And for the moment, let's just set our response to be something like that. And then we actually have to start listening on our port. And if this is successful, we just want to console log out that server is listening on port, and then let's insert our port like so. Okay, let's see if that even works. Come down here to our terminal, do npm run dev. But that isn't going to work because we didn't import our cause. I just remembered that just as I was typing that. So we need to do npm install cause, like so. I should have happily added it to our package.json, which it did. Let's then try and do an npm run dev. And now it's happier. It says server is listening on port 5000. Okay, let's see if that works. And if we hit localhost 5000 leaderboards, we do in fact get hello back. Okay, so that's a good start, but we actually want to hit a database. So this is this import pool from db.js. Let's put that back in and go away and create our db.js. So new file, db.js. So this is a Postgres database, so we import pg from pg, and we want to pull out pool from pg like so, And let me just jump to the end, which is that we want to create this pool object that we export. And let's export it as default, like so. And this takes a config that we need to set up here. So let's do that. Pool config. Now, this is going to be different depending on whether we are running on the Heroku server or locally. So Heroku is super friendly in that it actually sets up a connection string for us. And it sticks it in database _URL. So it creates an environmental variable called database _URL, and we can just stick that in connection string and we're good. Well, almost good, because actually we need to do one more option here, which is SSL and reject unauthorized with a Z false. So that would be enough to get it working on Heroku, but we want to be able to test locally. So if I just copy that, and okay, so if we do have this environmental variable set up, then sure, use it. Otherwise, we are running locally and we're going to hardwire in our dev credentials. So I've got a user of Postgres and I've set up my password to also be Postgres, because I don't care, because it's a dev database, so I'm not worried about hacking or anything. Host, it's our local host. It's complaining here because I think I've got my brackets wrong here. This needs to be another bracket here and this bracket gone. Okay, yeah, that's happier. And then I'll just format that. Yeah, okay, good. So host, local host, the default port that it uses is 5432, and database, and I am going to call it leaderboard with an S, leaderboards. Okay. So if this exists, then it will use this, otherwise it will use this. And let's put a semicolon on the end. So we're exporting that, so that is available to us like so. And let's use it. So let's get rid of this and we'll put a try catch in here. Let's handle any errors, so console.log, and we'll just console log out any errors that we get. And I'm just going to say await pull dot query, and then we want an SQL query here, and let's keep it simple for the moment. Select all from leaderboards, like so. And then we are going to return boards dot rows. If we try to run this, it's going to be unhappy because this await, it says unexpected reserve word, and the reason for that is, it'd be nice if it gave you a hint, but it's because we need async in the front here. As soon as we do that, it's happy. You just always have to remember that awaits always need to be inside asynchronous functions, so they need the async word. So just consider them always paired up like so. And what this essentially means is that this line here won't run or happen until we get a response back from the database returning all our leaderboards. But it's asynchronous in that this won't lock up our server. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, well, we don't actually have a leaderboards table in our Postgres database yet. So in fact, let's just create a file here, and we're going to call this database.sql. And we're not going to run this directly, although you can, but I'm just going to be doing cutting and pasting out of this file. But this will be all our SQL needed to create our database and our tables and things. So the first thing we want to be able to do is create this leaderboard database. Okay, so if we create another terminal here, and I'm just gonna put a comment here that we can start interacting with Postgres using this line, which logs into Postgres with this user here. So if I just copy that and paste it in here, so PSQL-U Postgres. I hit enter. It's going to ask me for my password, which again is Postgres. Hit enter, and now we're interacting with Postgres. So the first thing I want to do is create a database. So I can just simply copy this, paste this in here, make sure there's a semicolon on the end so it runs it immediately, and then hit enter, and it's created our database. If it comes back with create database, then it has actually created our database. I can do a /L, which basically lists all the databases that I've got, and as you can see, we have our leaderboard one in there. So the next thing we're going to want to do is create a table inside this database. So if I do create table, and this is going to be the leaderboards table, so plural, I'm going to say that we have an ID here, and it's going to be our primary key, and it's going to use this serial keyword here, which means that it will auto increment for us, so we don't have to worry about it. It will just look after itself. And I want a string field. So you do that with a varchar, and you can specify the length. My game names are never that long, but I'll give myself 30 characters to play with. Probably will never be longer than that. And then a player name, and again it's going to be a string, and again I'll probably make it 30, but I'll limit that probably in the front end. We should have commas after all these, so we need a comma there, comma there, comma there, and then we're going to have a score, and that's going to be an integer. And then never forget your semicolons, because it won't run without them. You can put, if you did that and paste, then if you just put a semicolon on and then hit enter, then that actually works. But yeah, try and remember to put a semicolon on the end. So let's try and create that table now. Now the thing we actually need to do first is we need to connect to our leaderboard database. So I will put the command in for doing that here. So that is /c leaderboard, like so. And again, these double dashes are comments within this SQL thing, so don't paste those in. So we're going to copy that, copy, come in here, paste that in, and now it says you are connected to database leaderboard. So now we can create our table by copying this along with a semicolon, copy, paste, enter. It's not happy about okay, so I forgot to say primary key there. I'm pretty sure everything else is okay. Let's try that again. Copy, paste, and yes, as you can see, we've got create table here, which means it's created our table. Now let's manually insert something into our table. But actually it'd be kind of handy to know what's in our table first. So we can do a select all from leaderboards, like that. And if we copy that, Control C, paste in here, enter, it says 0 rows because we haven't put anything in our table yet. So let's fix that. So we can do an insert into leaderboards, and we want to insert a game name, a player name, and a score. And we do that by doing values, and then in brackets the values that we actually want to put in. So this is for my game Hoardzy, and I'm going to say that Fred has scored a paltry 15 in the game. Not a very good player. So I will copy that, paste that in there, and it says that it is inserted. That okay. So let's copy that, paste, and now we should see that we now have one row in there saying that Fred has scored 15 in a game called Hoardzy. Okay, so we actually have a working database now. I'm going to switch back to this terminal here so I can see if any error messages and things come up. And let's come back here now. And where did we get to? Oh, we actually got to a point where we should be able to hit this endpoint here and see something come back. So let's just see if that works. So we named our database wrong, so we actually named our database leaderboards here. So let's change it here. So if we go back to db.js, take the S off, save, let's try that again. And as you can see, we get back, let's put it all on one line. Like so, we get back our JSON like so. So that is an array containing one row of data. So we can read our database now, and that's a really good starting place for our API. We're going to want our game to add to our leaderboard using this API as well. So let's do that next. So if we come into index.js, so we've done a get here. So if we're following the REST protocol correctly, we should use a post to add to our database. So we do something like this: post, and then request, response, and put in some code here. We're going to want it to be asynchronous, just like our get request. But if you think about it, we don't want to post to leaderboards. We actually want to specify our game in the URL. So we can do that very simply using Express. It's very cool. Just do a colon game. So we can get to that easily in our code by, well, let's first of all do our console log and console log out our message like so. But to get to that colon game, we can just look inside request.params and pull it out as simply as that, which is kind of cool. Okay, but how are we going to send across the player and the score? We can't put those in the URL. It's be somewhat clumsy. So we want to put that inside the body. So we want to make sure that our request body holds them. Okay, so presuming that that's all good, so we've got our player and our score in our body that we've pulled out, and our game that we've pulled out of our URL up here. Then we can simply do pool.query, and do you remember our little bit of SQL that we used to insert our line earlier? Let's go back. So we use this, didn't we? So if I actually copy and paste that, copy, paste, and we want to stuff game in here, player in here, score in here. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that pretty niftily by doing $1, $2, and $3, and then we can supply those values by passing in an array with game, player, and score, like so. Nice and easy. But it'd be quite nice to pass back what we've just added. So you can actually do that with this returning. So you can do returning asterisk like so, and that will pass back what we've just added to the database, which is kind of cool. And we could just do a return and set our result to board dot rows, and it will just be the one row. So it will be the first item, the only item in that array. Okay, so that's all good, but how on earth do we test that? Because we can't use our web browser anymore, we need to pull out the big guns. And when I say big guns, I mean Postman. So let's bring up Postman. So if we go to Postman and we type in this localhost 5000/leaderboards and click send, we will get back the one row in our database. So with Postman, you can do a post request nice and easily by just using this post. So click on the drop down, choose post. Okay, so if you remember rightly, we're not posting to this one here, we're actually posting to / in the name of our game. So that's going to be Horde Z, and that is the colon game that gets passed in to our request.params. And in the body, we are just specifying our player, and I'm just gonna say Bobby, and our score, which let's just say 1, 2, 3. So that all looks good. We've got post here, we've put Horde Z on the end here, raw, body, raw, JSON. So let's click send and see how that does. So that looks pretty hopeful. So we've our board ID has auto incremented to 2, and it's passed back what it added to the database, which is the game of Horde Z, player, Bobby, score 1, 2, 3. Now let's click here. Let's do localhost leaderboards like so. And we should now have 2 coming back. Let's just move that up. And like you see here, we do have 2 rows in our database now. One for Fred and one for Bobby. So that's the very basics of creating a leaderboard API. So we can read and we can add to it, but we do have some tidying up to do. So we're probably never going to use this one. I'm going to keep it in because it's quite nice just to get a very simple view of everything in our leaderboards table. But actually we want to always specify a game very similar to this. So I want the leaderboard for Horde Z, say, and I want it to show me the top 10 people in that leaderboard, or the top 100, whatever your game needs. So let's do that now. So that's going to be very similar to this line here. So I'm just going to copy this line and do an app.get, paste that in, async request dash response comma response arrow function like so. Try catch console.log error .message. Okay, all pretty boilerplate stuff. And this line here to pull out whatever they type in here. And then I'm just going to say something like board game, and it's equal to await pool.query select all from leaderboards where game is equal to, and this would be whatever we type in, which is horde, something like horde Z, but of course we know now that we can do this with a $1 like so, and if it was just that, it would be that like so. But I want it to be returned exactly how I'm going to display it on the screen. So it needs to be order by score descending. Simple as that. And then we can just do board game dot rows, and that would be all the rows that query passes back. Okay, so let's see if that works. Come back to Postman. At the moment they're in the wrong order, so if Fred scored less, he should, and so Bobby should be at the top here. So that should be pretty easy to see if this is working. Horde Z, send. There you go. So Bobby scored more, Fred was less. Now we don't know whether it's filtering on game yet. This here is essentially a filter saying only return the rows where game is whatever they've typed in here, so horde Z. So it would be nice to just double check that. So what we can actually do is, let's think of another game here, let's say Pac-Man, and player name of, say, P-Man, and let's say he scored 100 at Pac-Man. So okay, we should have a third row in here. You can see that it auto incremented, so it's looking pretty good. In fact, let's create another get and do local host 5.1.2.3 leaderboards, like so. So we should get 3 lines back. Yeah, we got 3 lines back because this get doesn't do any filtering, just returns everything. But let's go back here, and if we do a send, hopefully, yep, we only get the 2 records back. And I guess we could put in Pac-Man here, and hopefully we just get the 1 record back. Yeah, that's good. So this is looking pretty good for sending back a specific leaderboard with the highest scores at the top. Now I actually want, and you may not want this, but I actually don't want to save more than 10 people on my leaderboards. So this is a kind of optional extra if you want to do the same. If you don't want to fill your database up with thousands of users who've scored like 1 in your game. So I am going to delete anything that is not in the top 10. And this is how I'm going to do it. Now just notice that I'm not very consistent with my quotes here. I've got double quotes and single quotes. Definitely don't do that, mixing them up, but I'm gonna go and change that now, because you should not mix your quotes. You either do double quotes or single quotes, and I should be doing single quotes. There you go. Right, okay, so where was I? So this is, I guess, quite a complex query, but it's good to have a go at these complex queries. So I want to delete from leaderboards where game is equal to, and I'll pass in the game, and so it has to satisfy both these criteria. Board ID, which is that auto incrementing ID, is not in, it's good to do it on a primary key. And then what I don't want it in, well, I want to delete everything that's not in the top 10. So this should pass back my top 10. So board score D, so list all the board IDs from leaderboards. Again, do this where game to $1, and then order by score descending, and limit by however many. So mine's going to be 10, so do comma, and then in here, second one's 10, the first one is game. So $1 game, $2 10, and that should do the trick. So what's that going to do? That's going to insert the score of our player, but ironically, if he doesn't make it into the top 10, it'll immediately delete it again. But it'll delete anything that is not in this line, will delete everything that's not in the top 10. And so it kind of tidies up our database on every single write. It's probably not the most efficient way of doing it, but I don't care. It works. Let's save that. I probably won't test it completely. I'll just test that the post still works. So let's do another horde Z. And John can score 200 in horde Z. There you go. And that seems to work. Let's just check that out, and yeah, John should be the high scorer, so he's at the top now. So that seems to work. In fact, what I could do just to test this is, I don't want to put 10 values in, but what I could do is just momentarily change this to say 2, and then come back here. Let's just post this again, and then if we come back to this one and do there you go, we've only got the two Johns, both scored 200. Let's just do Freddie, like so. Come back here. There you go, Freddie and John. So it's only holding the top 2 scores, and everything else is getting deleted. So that's working nice. Let me just change that back to 10. Like so. And I guess the next thing to do is to deploy this. Okay, so we want to deploy to Heroku. So if you go to heroku.com and either log in with your details or sign up, and then if you come to documentation and the Heroku CLI, then you're going to want to follow these instructions here to install the Heroku CLI for your operating system. Now, like it says here, we should be able to verify that Heroku is installed if we do Heroku -- version. So let's just check that we have it installed. If I open another terminal and do Heroku -- version, you can see that we have the Heroku CLI installed correctly. Okay, so we're almost ready to get started with Heroku, but we actually want this to be in a Git repository because Heroku is going to use Git to deploy our app. So we want to create a Git repo, so we can do git init, and then we actually want to create a file called .gitignore because we don't want our node modules folder to be in our Git repository. So if we put in node modules there, then it's going to ignore our node modules folder. So now we can do git add dot, and then we can do git commit -m initial commit. So now we can do Heroku login -i and enter our login credentials. And now we're logged in to Heroku. We can do Heroku create, and I'm going to just call mine leaderboard. That's already taken, so I'm going to call mine leaderboard-Morgan. Okay, so that's set up the app on Heroku. So we can deploy our app by doing git push Heroku, and that would either be master or it might be main if you're using a more up-to-date version of Git. So I'm just going to do git push Heroku master because I'm in this master branch here. Okay, so now we need to set up our database on Heroku so that if we take a look at our db.js, we get this database URL and it connects to a database on Heroku. So if we go back to the documentation, if we click on Get Started and then Node.js, and if we come down to provision a database, we need this exact line here. So Heroku add-ons, create Heroku PostgreSQL :hobbydev. So if we just copy that, come back to our terminal, and then we can just paste that in. Let's see what that said. This database is empty, but it's created our database, which is cool. So this line here has actually gone away and created us a Postgres database. So we don't need to do this line here, but we still need to create the table. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to put in what we need to type. So in here we need to do Heroku PG::PSQL. So very similar to this line here, but this will set it up on Heroku. So if I just copy that, Control C, come down here, paste, and so now we're inside the Heroku database, and we want to create this table here. Control C, and we've created that table. And let's just, for fun, let's do _Z, let's call this Jimmy, and make that 150. Let's copy that line, so we're going to insert a line into our table. Right click to paste, and there you go, we've put one line in here, and if we do select all, Control C, right click to paste, and there you go, we have one line in our Heroku Postgres database now. Oh, and a typo error. I had this and it should be that. And that small little error took me about 5 minutes to work it out. But yeah, that is a big problem. It will not work unless this has exactly the right casing. So reject, capital U, everything else lowercase. And if we now make that correction, and then do git add, git commit, git push Heroku master. If we come back here, we should see our one line that we added manually into the database. Now, of course, if we want to fully test the API, we can come along to Postman, and you want to type in your Heroku app URL in here correctly, /leaderboards, do send, and you'll see that we get the one line back here. Also, post request should work as well. Let me just copy that, paste that in here. Let's choose post, let's do horde Z, again body raw JSON, and what do we need in here? We need player, that needs to be like so, let's call it James, and let's do a score of 99. Let's send that. We're getting it back with an auto increment of the board ID, which is always good. Let's come back here, and we've got 2 now. So you have successfully implemented the back end of the Pern stack on Heroku. So you've done a full deployment, and you can essentially use this API now to implement leaderboards in your game. Okay, so we have our API, and we've shown how we can call it using Postman, but how do you actually call it from a game? Well, if you're writing the game in JavaScript, then I've got a good example for you here. So we have my game Horde C. I've added scoreboard.js JavaScript module, and to actually get the scores, we'll do the getting the scores first. We can simply use fetch. You can use Axios as well, but fetch seems to work quite nicely. So this score.url will be, if we go back to Postman, it'll be, let me go to the get. So it will be this URL here. So as you can see in Postman, that works fine. We get our list back here. So this will be this score URL here, and then we just need to send it in an object specifying that the method is get. We need to specify in headers that the content type will be application/JSON, and then we just simply pull out the JSON out of the response like this and return it. And then this is how you would call this get scores. So you do and await this .get scores because it's asynchronous, and then scores will be this array here. So we can go for each one, and as you can see, score.player, score.score, and I'm just writing this out. I'm using Pixie.js here to write this out, but however you want to write it out to the screen. So the post is a little bit more involved, but still not too much of a problem. So if you have a look at the index.html, I have a form here that pops up to say you scored, and I've got a submit button with button type of submit. You've got to make sure that you name your inputs. So I've got a name of score here, a name of player here, and this form has an ID of score form. So now I can simply, in my code, I can grab a reference to the score form like so. I can hook up the submit event to my handle submit method, and here's my handle submit method. So I'm preventing default because I want to handle it myself, and we're using form data, which has good browser support and enables to handle our form data quite nicely. So we send it in our form, and we get back the data from our form, and we want to convert this data in our form into, let's go back here, into this here. So this needs to go into our body as JSON, and so this is what this line, and this line is doing. So eventually we get in our body a JSON string that looks like this. So again, we're using fetch here, but this time the method is set to post. The score URL is this URL here. And once we've done this fetch post, it will have updated our leaderboard. And so what you should end up with is something like this, where you can pull down high scores from your leaderboard. And then if I just quickly, I should just let myself die. Let me get a few points though. And as you can see, I can enter a name here and then click submit, and you can see that I've appeared on the leaderboard. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. Thanks for watching.